Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to the Association of Corporate Counsel Foundation webinar, The Empathy Code, A Human Approach to Tech and Data. I'm KJ Forrest, the Program Director for the ACC Foundation. And today, our panel of industry leaders will explore the critical role of empathy in driving effective investigations, generative AI tool deployment, ethical data management, and fostering innovation, and how integrating empathy into technology and data practices can enhance outcomes, improve access to technological skill sets, and build trust to promote a more inclusive and innovative environment. As I mentioned before, we're very glad that you've chosen to join us today, and we hope this webinar is both informative and inspiring. And a couple things before we get started. First and foremost, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, iDiscovery Solutions. IDS has been a tremendous partner and supporter of the ACC Foundation, helping us to fulfill our mission of advancing DEI across the legal profession. We value this relationship to the utmost and are ever excited about the amazing things that we continue to do together to make the legal profession a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive space where all parties, without a shadow of a doubt, feel like they belong. Secondly, we have a lot to cover today, but we'd definitely like to take as many questions as time permits. So as you have questions that arise, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box in the platform so you don't forget them, and then we'll save time at the end to address them there. Now, without further ado, I have the honor of introducing Bobby Williams, Director and DEI Chair at IDS, who will tell us a bit about the organization and kick off today's discussion. Bobby, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Keelan. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, ACC Foundation, for the wonderful work that you do and for including me in it. I really appreciate it. My favorite thing is to share information with people. So hopefully people leave our exchanges a little bit smarter than before the exchange occurred. The opposite would be tragic. Thank you, Keelan, for facilitating everything. I've appreciated working with you thus far and hope to do so much more in the future. As Keelan said, my name is Bobby Williams. I have been with iDiscovery Solutions for about 11 years. We are an expert services firm, and we do everything from traditional e-discovery to digital forensic data collection, analysis. I do expert testimony as well as a lot of the really talented and qualified people at my firm. You have questions about data and tech, give us a call. Conversations are usually free. I'm a data scientist. I have a concentration in digital forensics investigation, and I've been an e-discovery professional for about 24 years. I've worked with data and technology for half my life, and I do a lot of collaborative work to help make spaces more inclusive and equitable. So I focus a lot on data and people. There are two very important things to know about me moving forward before I introduce my contemporary Joe. One, I'm a huge nerd in all aspects. You might be able to see from some of the art on my wall that I love nerdy things. I'm also literally a huge nerd. I'm like 6'6", so if you ever meet me face to face, you won't be surprised by how tall I am. The second thing is that I love people. Some friends say I am people powered. I've been called Bobby relationships by many people in my life. I believe in the power of people and what we can do if we work together to understand one another. So, with that people focused lens, let's talk about today's key topics. We will look at some points of connection between people and data. We'll explore the sequence I call the empathy code that uses empathy to help us collaborate better. We'll take a look at ways we practice empathy in the context of data. Then my contemporary Joe Amachata will he'll talk about privacy and he'll explore some items that you should consider from an in-house perspective where he has a ton of experience. And with that, I'll hand it over to Joe so that he can tell you a little bit about himself.
Thanks, Bobby. Appreciate having me today. Thank you so much. Maybe just the kind of standard disclaimer, obviously, comments today don't necessarily represent my clients or my employer, but I think that's clear. And very much a non-traditional path to become a tech attorney in my example. So I actually did an IT degree, economics and IT degree, and a business master's, and only then went back to law school. But I worked in various hands-on casework heavy people focused roles for many years, and even though I've been in-house for a very significant number of years now, again, it was always very hands-on. I was embedded within HR departments, and obviously you know, each of those roles had a very much people focus. It wasn't just a well, maybe let me put it this way. You know, I only worked for a number of months in a very junior internship style capacity in law firms. I was very much hands-on with my own direct cases, and certainly within the HR department. So really happy to be here today to I guess add to the context, add a little bit from the perspective of a global enterprise software giant, that is SAP, where I lead privacy related topics for North America. So lead senior legal counsel for data protection and privacy. So thank you so much for having me. Hope to be able to contribute and help to the conversation.
I suspect your contribution shall be significant, Joe. So thank you for being a part of it. And let's get into the topic so that people can start seeing what we have to say and asking questions that hopefully we'll be able to answer. So I want to begin with a basic question, and it's not a trick question. So just give me your best answers to this question. In the conventional sense, why does technology exist? You can give your answers in the chat. And while you start listing your answers, I'll give you a hint. One of the reasons technology exists, I think, is to improve quality of life, right? So that's a hint as to what types of answers we're looking for. We'll give a chance for people to give some answers, and then maybe I'll see if Joe has a thought to add to it as well. Okay, so to improve the human condition is a good one. To increase efficiency. So definitely a theme. Joe, what do you think? What are some other reasons why technology is?
They're hitting the nail on the head there. I suppose tools ultimately is what they are. They're very advanced tools, and you know, I think back to some of my previous roles. A number of years ago, I led corporate compliance and ethics and the data privacy team at Lidl. They're a global grocery store giant, and I led their operations in those areas for the United States. But as you can imagine, you know, a people-centric, huge business that has, you know, hundreds and thousands of employees. These tools were ultimately what we needed to be able to, you know, manage their payroll, to manage their hours, just to support the folks to actually get the, you know, everything they needed in place so that they could actually do their job. So to me, it jumps to kind of that resources or a tool for efficiency to make life easier. I think we've a couple of solutions coming in through the chats as well.
Yeah, I see. To provide access to resources. So thank you, Cassandra, Jill B, Rashna, and Avi for your answers. And Joe, thank you for pairing that with a story, which is always helpful. I think it also it just makes tasks easier, right? It enhances our capabilities. That empowerment is big, providing resources to people who didn't have them, empowering people to do things that they couldn't do otherwise. Technology also connects us. Just think about the fact that we now walk around with one of the most powerful computers ever created in our pockets and in our purses and backpacks, right? So what do all these things have in common? All of these different things for which technology exists. I think the common thread is people. Technology is developed by and for people, and Joe hit the nail on the head, even when we think that is not the case. Take something like climate change, for example. We want to protect biodiversity and decrease greenhouse gases, et cetera. And so we develop all this technology to accomplish this. But the reality is, if we fail, the planet's atmosphere would deteriorate until it could no longer sustain human life. But if our species did not survive, the Earth would continue to exist and maybe even recover without our presence on it. So I maintain that technology is all about and for people. And what does this say about the data that is born from the creation and use of technology. Doesn't it mean that data is directly and indirectly created for and by people? So I think there's an opportunity in that. I think we can learn more about our individual and collective selves from data. Data definitely tells a story. It's a collection of digital facts, and those facts tell us about the ideas and in many instances, the actions of people. The creation of these data points are usually triggered by a person or carried out by a person or responded to by a person or programmed by a person. And these facts can tell us about what people knew, what they said, what they did, what they were in possession of during a current event. And that story can help give us more understanding and more insight into people. So, why is that important? Because I think the opposite is true as well. Understanding people can give us insight into how data and technology can be better used to improve quality of life for people and empower people and to make us more efficient and improve the way we connect, and help us fill in the blanks, which is what I do for a living in digital forensics. Time and history, I think, have taught us that storytelling is an effective means of educating people. So if we can use data to learn about people and tell stories that make us smarter and better connected, then we can feed the cycle of human advancement. So with that idea, I have another question for you all. And again, this is not a trick question, just honest answers. You did great the first time. So my question for you is, why is investing in the stock market different from gambling? And again, it's not a trick question. Whatever honest answers occur to you, you can just drop it in the chat. But very interested in hearing what you think. Of course, I have some thoughts on the matter. Give it a second. See if anybody drops something in the chat. I give it a little bit. Joe, you want to take a crack at, okay, decisions
I
can
have
be
lots of thoughts,
somewhat
but I'm not sure if I should
informed
share them
when
all.
Jill B, who is thank you, Jill B, for being so engaging during our discussion today. Decisions can be somewhat informed when investing. I think that's a great answer. All right. Anything else, Joe, before I move on?
I guess I jump to, gambling for the purpose of gambling, but investing for sure has risks that we all understand, and but the other part of it is, the positive is obviously it's if folks do have available finances to be able to provide them to somebody who needs that capital to be able to hopefully do something good. I don't see that on the gambling side, but anyway, I know everyone
These
has
are good
strong
thoughts.
opinions on these topics. Yeah.
These are great thoughts. Avi says stock valuations are based on economic principles. That is another big difference. And she mentioned house rules, which I think is really important. Also, investing uses public data. And I think that's starting to get close to what I think is the biggest difference between the two. So gambling is based on chances and probability, and that's pretty much it. The only choice you can make when you're gambling pretty much is, do I keep gambling or do I stop gambling? And if you keep going, the odds change, but it's mostly based on the circumstances and not really based on your decision. So you can take an extra hit in blackjack because of odds. You can fold a hand in Texas Hold'em because of the odds. And some people bluff, but they largely bluff because of the odds. They think about the likelihood someone has a hand that could beat the hand that they have, right? And sometimes you base it partially on any tendencies you've seen of people while you're playing. But you can't bluff a roulette wheel. And every time that wheel spins, the odds of a ball landing on a particular color or a number, they're the same. And this is assuming, of course, like nobody's cheating or counting cards or anything like that, right? But you can't change the odds. You can only make bad or good decisions based on knowing or not knowing the odds. Now, investing is almost entirely based on the decisions of other people. And the stock market is a great example of how understanding the way people think is being put to work on a global scale. The price of a stock goes up or down based on like three primary factors. How many people are currently trading the stock? How many of those people are buying it? And how many of those people are selling it? And if enough people are trading a stock and more of them are buying it than selling it, the price goes up. If more of those people are selling it than buying it, it goes down. And if something really awful happens in the world, nothing actually happens to the stock of the price of the stock. What happens is people decide, oh no, this terrible thing happened. Let me sell it before I lose my money. And enough people do that, and then the price goes down. And the same thing if something really awesome happens, they say, oh, let me buy it now because it's gonna go up, and I want to take advantage of the gains. And you might ask, like, why are investors using charts and graphs and market data, like Avi mentioned? It's because that historical information on those graphs feed indicators, and those indicators predict possible trends, but they only work because people respect them. If people did not respect the indicators, then they would just be reports. They wouldn't be useful for trying to determine what to do next. So these indicators, they give us information about the way people act in certain conditions, what they've done, what they're likely to do. Make no mistake, probabilities, they're still a factor, but we're looking at the probability of how the market will react, how a sector will react, how a company will react, all these things made up of people. And what are people going to do when there's a change in conditions or there's no change in conditions? It's all about people. It's another example of caring about the experience of people and how data helps us understand people, and people give us more insight into data. It's all linked. With that, I'm gonna take a pause right here, just in case somebody has a question. And Joe, if you have any thoughts you think you might want to add.
I think in the discussion, what we propose to do a little later on is to kind of touch on some of the basic privacy principles. Again, not to give a 101, let's say, for folks to follow to ensure privacy compliance or anything, but more to really kind of come back to what are those core principles to think about. And we'll touch on each of them in some moments, but every single one of them are, are a critical component is human empathy at each point. So just have to back up what you've said today, but we'll come to it in more detail in a few moments.
Awesome. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation, Joe and I both think that understanding people are very important, especially in the context of technology, but just in general, it's important to understand people. So one of the reasons empathy is so important is because people feel it's important. People think it's important. They want to live in a world where the people around them care about their experience. And that's not just what I believe. Business Solver did a comprehensive study just before the pandemic, and that study found that CEOs recognize the importance of empathy. 87% of the CEOs that were polled, they tied empathy to the financial performance of the organization. And employees weighed in too. 90% of them wanted the company to empathize with their situations, and they were more likely to stay with the company if they felt empathy from the company. 92% of those employees, they saw empathy as something that just wasn't like given enough value. And so my question is going to be why? Why is empathy so important? I call this sequence the empathy code. It's a sequence that I think has the power to optimize how people interact if it is leveraged effectively. So in my interactions, I always try to leverage it, and I have found that it has made me a better investigator because I'm trying to care about the experiences of the people that I'm investigating. So first, can you demonstrate empathy? Can you show another person that you genuinely care about the experience they are having? Can you recognize the impact of your words or your silence, your action or your inaction, and what impact that may have on their experience? And if you can demonstrate empathy, uh, then you can start to build trust. And when you start to build trust, you see that it's a vital component of sustaining a relationship. And a relationship is not just one interaction. The relationship is interaction after interaction after interaction that proves the presence of authenticity of that empathy over time. And I think this creates an environment of psychological safety. And when people feel psychologically safe, they believe they can be open in a space and that's free of ridicule, or even worse, a space that's free of indifference or disregard. They start to share things with you, right? They share access to their ideas that may solve problems or spark another idea that solves a problem, ideas that they would not have shared if they didn't feel psychologically safe to share them. They share access to information that might help you. It may help them. It may provide context. It may give you clarity, access to systems. And now we're starting to get more into my work, access to locations, access to devices, to social media platforms, to databases, to accounts. And that sharing in a psychologically safe environment unlocks the power of innovation to help us go beyond only solving this problem and consider alternative solutions, but asking ourselves if there are workflows we can adopt here while we're trying to solve this problem that will help us in other areas. Or is what we're doing now repeatable so that if we have this issue again, we know what to do to resolve it. So for us, uh, what other data sources may help us understand what happened? Can we reconstruct events with the data that we have? Can we get more out of this data? Can we use the data to provide a different way to increase our understanding or make us more efficient or improve the effectiveness of a tool like we were talking about earlier in the presentation?
Bobby, if you let me interject, I
Yeah.
think your sequence that you just showed is absolutely relevant. In a HR internal context, perhaps absolutely relevant. Equally, you could apply it, in a pure friendship, uh, context. But I also want to go to maybe the third one as well, very, very briefly, because I'm interrupting. But in the business to business context as well, you know what I mean. You have to have that understanding of what maybe a customer, and maybe to link this back to the in-house counsel perspective a little bit. I think the labor law perspective is clear, but for the business to business side, to have that trust, so that you can build those relationships and then really get the business done. I think certainly, the likes of SAP or the large IT companies, everything we do is built on trust. It's not necessarily whether we break the law or not, even if we don't break the law at all, but we lose the trust of our customers. It's a major issue, and could have major consequences. So, we really have to kind of start with something like this, even though maybe the way you presented it was a completely different context. But I do want to say that it can be applied in completely different ways as well.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the empathy code is so applicable in so many different environments. I think CEOs can use it to collaborate better with their teams. If you're like if you're a comedic writer at a writer's table with other writers and actors, it can improve your engagement. Improvisers on stage can improve how they interact during scenes. I do a lot of improv. I said I was a nerd. I warned y'all. And investigators, like what I do, communicating with custodians and witnesses. I think, Joe, you hit the nail on the head as you have continued to do during this presentation. Empathy builds trust. It strengthens relationships, fosters psychological safety, and optimizes our innovation.
In
So
previous roles, I was a a certified fraud examiner in the past and a compliance officer, and I would certainly say, yeah, in the investigation side, I know, Bobby, you've more recent experience in that area, but your first interaction with the people involved is critical. But anyway, I'll let you go ahead.
no, that's poignant and appropriate. And please continue to interject when you have a thought. It's helpful to the conversation. I'm taking a look to see if anybody has any questions. If not, we're going to keep moseying along. No questions in the chat. Okay. So I think anytime you have a discussion, it's useful to be able to walk away with practical things you can do that you can apply, right? If you can do that. So try not to keep the conversation so esoteric. So we agree that people, data, and technology, right? All of them are linked, and that empathy can improve our engagement with all of them, the way we interact with people and the way we interface with data and tech. But how do we do it, right? Practically speaking, how do you use empathy? How do you work the muscle in a tangible way? I think the way you do it is you start by taking a poll. So let's see if we can bring up the first poll question. First poll question is, what is the most popular messaging app in the world? Give folks a second. I'm not going to say anything, obviously, because I know the answer, and Joe knows the answer. So we're not going to say anything just yet. I will also say I wasn't surprised by the answer when I learned this answer, and it's been this answer for some time. I've been asking people this question for a few years, and it has been consistently been the answer.
You guys ready for me to share what the audience thinks?
I'm ready.
Either way.
Oh man. So 100% of people said WhatsApp, and 100% of people are correct. As of April 2024, so I'm sure it's more now, WhatsApp had 2 billion active users. That's almost double, if you look at the chart, of Facebook Messenger at number 3, and nearly 700 million more than WeChat at number 2. So why do I care? And why do you care? I think it will be helpful to know, as lawyers, investigators, paralegals, legal assistants, judges, CEOs, subject matter experts, marketing professionals, influencers. For some reason, people enjoy the interaction with WhatsApp. They enjoy that interface. Maybe they like the way it exchanges information. Maybe they like the way you can share photos in it. Maybe, who knows, right? But people are enjoying that experience. So for me, knowing that 2 billion accounts are enjoying that experience means that maybe I need to be thinking about that when I'm asking questions before I do an investigation about what kind of communication platforms might be important and have potentially relevant information in an investigation. And even if you take a step back, not just WhatsApp, if you look at WhatsApp, WeChat, Facebook Messenger, and Telegram, that's like what, like 6 billion or roughly active accounts between them. So maybe I need to be thinking about how important third-party messaging apps are important in general in communications, instead of just by default assuming that email is going to be the only place to look for.
And I wonder if we were to look at how many cell phones or devices that these apps can work on exist in the world, it might lead us at least to believe that in all likelihood, folks have multiple apps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because when we get to the next one, we'll see that absolutely has to be the case, right? So because Joe prompted us so masterfully, let's take another poll. Ask you all another question. I believe in you because you did so well. This one, I think, is not going to be as obvious as the first one, but we'll see what we say. What is the most popular social media platform in the world? Your options are Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and WhatsApp. I'll give you a second, and then Keelan or Sarah will let us know when we're ready.
It'd be really interesting to ask the same question again amongst privacy attorneys. For another day, for another day.
Here we go.
All right, so we got more of a mixture this time, and WhatsApp didn't get any love, but I will tell you that before I knew this, YouTube would have been my answer, right? But YouTube is not correct. I can definitely see why Instagram is the answer. But reigning supreme as of April of this year is Facebook with over 3 billion active accounts. So what does that mean for me, right? First of all, it means YouTube is a social media platform. At least it's considered that way by people who do polls like this. And that Instagram is in the top 3. What it really means for another conversation is that Meta is doing very well because they own Facebook and Instagram. So they're doing pretty well. But also, as an investigator, is it wise for me to disregard social media as a potential source of useful information in investigations when I know there are billions of people engaged with almost 10 billion accounts across these platforms? And when there's platforms on here that didn't even make this list, you know, like X and Threads and stuff like that. So as an investigator, I need to be thinking about this, right? When I'm asking questions. So how do I apply this daily? Because this is one of the ways that I use empathy to help me in my line of work. Think about the experiences that people are having, and then use my understanding of experiences that people are having to inform how I think about data and how I think about why, when, and how data might be useful. But these are some more tangible ways in my daily interaction that empathy helps me keep people first in my line of work. But like Joe pointed out earlier, this is applicable in nearly every professional or personal circumstance. I call this like my empathy routine or my empathetic routine. Like anytime I engage people, I try to be mindful of these things. So when I start an investigation, I know that that investigation is just the beginning. When I start digging into the data of a case, I don't go in with answers. I'm only going in with questions. I start at 0 when it comes to facts. I have some things at my disposal. I have expertise, experience. I have methods for vetting potentially relevant data sources. But I use my toolkit to ask questions to help me start building facts. And one of the first questions that I ask is an experiential question. I want to know what experience people are having because it's informative to me. So I may ask a party or a witness or a custodian or a system owner to describe a day in their life, right? When you wake up, what's the first thing you do? For many people, it's like tell Alexa to shut up with the alarm, or is to turn the alarm off on their phone. But if it's their phone is the first thing they touch, it tells me a lot about how much the phone is integrated into their daily life, right? So there may be some really useful potential data sources on that phone. And they may check their email and their calendar when they first wake up. And now I know that if they're checking their work email and their work calendar, that at least one professional data system is connected to their mobile device. And that could be relevant if it needs to potentially be collected for an investigation, or if you're doing something that's more frequent for in-house, which is doing a data map or drafting an information governance protocol or a communication protocol or something like that. Maybe you go to the gym next and then you go home, take a shower before you get started working. Well, it could be important to one of my investigations that geolocation data comes into play and lets me know when somebody was at a particular location, where they were, and help me as I'm gathering more facts. So I ask, what's a day in a life? Um, I also take feedback from people that I trust. It helps me build my empathy muscle, and it shows other people on my team that I find value in what they have to offer. My colleagues and I do what I call case storming. I'm trying to get them to call it case storming too, but I call it, instead of brainstorming, I call it case storming. We get a new matter, we clear conflicts, we see who can discuss it, who can't discuss it. And then everybody who's permitted, we hop on a call, we pull up the evidence, we ask questions, see what we're seeing, share screens, anecdotes about what people found in other instances. Is it applicable to this? And I tell my clients, when you hire one of us, you hire all of us, because we leverage the power of the whole squad. Other people want to feel like they are making a contribution. So I create space for them to actually make a contribution. So I tell people, my anime power up is my team. And I think that's my second nerd reference today. So
Just two. Have we
just
got two
two,
more?
just two. So I'm actually doing pretty well. So Joe, if my nerd index goes too high, Joe will bring me back in line.
Or encourage.
Or encourage. I also try to remember that good ideas can come from anywhere. The most senior team member or the most junior person on a team, I want everyone to share ideas. So I directly engage them to see what they are thinking, and I make sure I stay open to what they give me. And I am always working at every step of my life with varied levels of success, to treat the evidence fairly, to treat the facts that I learned fairly, and to treat the people that are involved in the matter fairly. I want to make sure that I don't have a bias that could be blocking my ability to see something crucial in a case. So I'll literally ask myself, do I have a presupposition or an assumption or a bias that's getting in the way of what I'm seeing here? Am I missing something? Do I have a blind spot that's causing me not to see something in this data? Right? So I prioritize the way I communicate with people, not just what I'm communicating, but how I'm communicating with them. Because in those interactions, I want to show the people on my team, my clients, their end clients, I want to show everybody to understand that I care about the experience that we're having, not just in this project, but even in the immediate interaction we're having at that moment. I ask questions, because that gives me information. And here's another thing about asking questions: it empowers other people to teach you when you need to know something. Demonstrates that you value what they have to offer. As I work to create an environment where people feel psychologically safe enough to share, I stay open to receive what they share. Or like I said, at least I try to, and the levels of success are varied. I also understand that I may have done something thousands of times, but the custodian or the parties, or sometimes even a junior attorney, may be dealing with this dispute for the first time. So I treat it like it's important to me because it's important to them, and also because the experience they're having, that is important to me. So I handle their data with respect, and I keep it safe, and I make sure my team is doing the same thing. And I think with that, I will let Joe start talking about the privacy thing, because I think that's very, very important for in-house. And Joe, let me know what you need me to do in regards to slides. Otherwise, I will get out your way.
Sounds good. We'll have a secret signal. Let's go to the next slide. But delighted to try to talk a little bit of the power and practice of empathy in a privacy perspective. Obviously, I have a couple of slides here. these are not just more simple than Privacy 101, but they're, back of an envelope basics. But I do think that they're quite important, and that in a lot of ways they represent, kind of some of the fundamental privacy principles that apply in the most complex of context or the most simple of context. And maybe if you'll allow me for a moment, if we think of a very, very simple use case, collecting somebody's business cards in a jar at a conference. So just doesn't matter what, but just to pick one very useful one. Jump on there, Bobby, and allow the various steps to pop up. So your traditional kind of privacy expectation is that you've come some kind of notice, so information transparency here. You're trying to build trust. Well, you don't tell them what you're going to do. How can they trust? Obviously, choice is very important. I think it's a complete different feeling if somebody, if something is mandatory, something is optional. Back to our business card in the jar. It's not mandatory. It's not that you can't get out the door unless you do it. But building on the notice a little bit, this kind of, what is your legal basis, your rationale, or what is it you plan to do? And it's important to really think that out in advance. And to limit that, I'm going to collect those business cards so they have a list of everyone who attended, so I can send them the slides, or whatever it is. And maybe it's more expansive than that. But to be honest, obviously, in that notice, so people can make the right choice based on what you told them. And then obviously, it can't be kind of project creep, let's say, oh, well, I hadn't thought about it before, but this data is very interesting for something else. But that's not the choice. That's not the consent or whatever it is that people gave at the original collection. And feel free to let the entire few pop up. The data minimization side, again, and for anyone who works in privacy, this is an incredible oversimplification. But I do think it's really important just to remember it's purely thinking about, well, do we really need that information? If we have 5 extra, when you apply for a job, do they need social security number now? You're still only an applicant. Why now? So data minimization is a privacy principle, but it's actually coming into law in a significant number of US states, specifically mandate, data minimization, that you only actually collect what you genuinely need. Now, again, that ties on the previous 2 steps. Well, what are you going to do with it? Will impact what you need. And that you've been honest in the first place. Security side is clear from the trust perspective. If it doesn't matter what you promise, if you can't control your own security and somebody else can do whatever, somebody grabs the jar of business cards for our silly example and runs off, then, well, it doesn't matter what you, if you promised you were going to shred them tomorrow, it's out of your control. So that's a clear one. But the final one then that I think folks think about it when it's pointed out, and again, wild simplification, but the accountability for onward transfer topic, that if you've collected for data from somebody, based on certain promises with a specific intended purpose, and you hand it over to somebody else, you're accountable for the promises you've made. And again, I'm wildly simplifying here, but under what conditions have you given it to somebody else? Because the promises you've made apply, including to if you can't just subcontract it out to somebody else and then renege on all your promises. But I hope that's really helpful as a 5 fingers of, if you know nothing about privacy whatsoever, to think about those 5 things in each use case, and I hope it can be a little bit helpful. But Bobby, I think that the next slide we kind of try to go through these again, but maybe to talk a little bit about how it gets a little bit more complicated in the AI context. But they are the same 5 principles again, and the notice choice. Really do think about them. But certainly, when it comes to AI, it's a little bit more complicated. And maybe if you'll bear with me for a minute, and I appreciate some people love this topic and some don't. But maybe let's just think about some of them. One of our, I haven't put out funny before, simplified here, but in notice and choice, how does somebody choose for AI? I mean, if your data is going into that LLM, it's likely not that you've clicked to consent. It's probably some, large scale scraping, or where did that data come from? Can somebody really say no? So that gets a little bit more challenging, and there has to be different ways to address that. Companies are doing different kinds of transparency efforts in ways because they appreciate that this is challenging. So maybe they're being more transparent than they ever were before in some other areas to try to genuinely demonstrate their intent to be transparent and open. And maybe purpose limitation was one of ours. I've simplified it a little bit. But how do you limit the purpose? Our traditional example is, well, I'm collecting your data so that I can send you the slides after. But in an LLM, especially, some of the newer examples we've seen recently, by definition, whoever builds this model has no idea what the end purpose would be, because the end purpose is typed in by some user. So therefore, how can you get the right notice, and how can you ensure people actually understand the choice they make? And then how do you limit it? I mean, you could phrase it very broadly or honestly, which is the right thing, of course, and directly to say, well, we're collecting your data to train this model, which could be used for whatever. But again, I'm wildly simplifying, but it is very important just to kind of think that those kind of core principles we believe in are harder in AI context. The next one, the kind of right to opt out or the right to delete. Sorry, I might have messed with the graphics. So the right to opt out, right to delete a little bit. Again, that's quite hard. In a normal privacy context, a whole load of state laws, global idea. There's an idea that I could write to whoever it was that collected those business cards and say, look, I'm Joe. I gave you the business card last week. Any chance you'd delete that for me? And there might be, in instances, be legally obliged to say yes and delete it. Various carve-outs, etc. If I didn't pay my bill or whatever, of course there are carve-outs. But that gets much harder again in the AI context. How do I even know that my data was in there in the first place? Who do I contact? Could they even take out the inferences that were made based on my data from a model? So again, businesses have to really work hard to provide opportunities to be as close to the spirit of the law as possible, or maybe even go further to kind of counteract the fact that that's really hard. And I don't have all the answers today. I just want to come back to our kind of trust topics again. And then the last one obviously is the the elephant in the room, and certainly the big focus for regulators. Opportunity to do it right, but opportunity, we always see rightly some of the horrible examples where it's gone badly wrong. And this is where whatever tool or software, whatever it is, actually makes the decision, as distinct from a human in the loop, or some human makes the decision, or it it really substantially makes in theory there's a human that presses the button, but I think they're the kind of four of our core privacy principles. And again, the 5 principles apply. Again, they're the right questions to ask, but the answers can be a little bit more complex in the AI context. I hope that's helpful. I just really wanted to kind of go through it, not as a kind of an academic lecture, but really, I know there are probably folks on the call today who, whether they like it or not, we're told at some point in-house, maybe a small in-house team, we're told, oh, you're responsible for privacy as well. And certainly what I've said today isn't enough to guarantee that you meet all your compliance obligations. But I would really recommend you try and think of those 5 privacy principles in every instance. Again, it won't guarantee compliance in any way, but I think it will really help you ask the right questions to build that internal trust and obviously the trust for the relationship side as well. So maybe kind of just a final kind of wrap up on some of the common themes, maybe, if you'll allow me just a moment, and be conscious of the clock. But folks are probably a little overwhelmed with a large number of new privacy laws. So the next slide just tries to kind of really simplify what are those common themes there again, and they're the inverse of those privacy principles again, the right to be informed, access, delete, to object or opt out. But the second part, clarifies the obligations that are often on a business. And again, I don't put these here for you to learn them. I put them here to kind of for you to think that the 5 principles, those 5 fingers again we pointed to before, help you a long way along the journey to meet, to ensure these rights, their legal rights for the data subjects, but also to meet the obligations that might be on your business. If you're the in-house counsel, you might have a legal obligation as a business to meet these things. So hopefully that's helpful, just to re-emphasize those 5 privacy principles. as a core element in really remembering that all the data you collect is, humans are behind this. It's not just bits. There are humans. They have feelings. Some folks are very privacy conscious, and some others couldn't care less, and that's okay. But we have to, respect the diversity of opinion on these topics. But anyway, I'll hand back to you there, Bobby. But the goal was really just to kind of remind you that, particularly in privacy, trust is absolutely key. Not just maybe to do the legally mandatory thing, but to kind of go a bit further and do something that you're really proud of.
No, I think that's you hit the nail on the head, Joe. I think a lot about how when I have conversations with my colleagues in cybersecurity and incident response, we talk a lot about like what the weakest point in a security system is. And in any security system, the weakest point is the people. Because no matter how much security, how many protocols you put in place, how many portals you open or close, uh, you have to give people access to data and systems so that they can do their job. So I think it's really important to think about what is the experience people are having when they engage your systems. What is the experience people are having when you're teaching them about security awareness and when you're educating them and instructing them on what to do if there's an incident. How are you leveraging these things like storytelling and other things to highlight and elucidate for people, like, this is how I recognize a potential problem or a potential threat, right? It's like you put here in this slide. There are always humans that exist behind the data. There are humans using the data and accessing the data, and a lot of the data is created because a human did something at somewhere along the line. So I think it's really beneficial for us to think about that. I think with the time, we can open it up for general questions. And while we're waiting to see if there are general questions, Joe, I can ask you one.
Easy one, I hope.
Yeah. So we hear a lot about new privacy laws, as you stated, coming into force. How would you summarize the changes for a non-privacy expert audience? And do these new laws represent a change in attitude to data privacy by Americans?
I think that's a very important question, really. So there is an emerging patchwork of privacy laws, a separate overlaying one of AI laws. To me, the biggest challenge, I think, is, it's positive, obviously, to see increased legal rights for individuals who deserve them and should have them. Pity maybe it's not at a federal level, so they're all uniform and the same. To me, I guess, my concern is that this patchwork might lead to a kind of a tick box client compliance effort, as distinct from a real in-depth human review of practices, which is, I think, really the core behind privacy. Again, that, my concern would be that people would naturally, and I can understand corporations' pressure to do this, build checklists for what is the compliance requirements in each place. Okay, tick, 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 great, we're good. Rather than maybe forget about the humans that are behind this and have empathy for the actual data subjects. But I think, yeah, as the patchwork continues to explore, to expand, and expanding at pace, I think that's a big challenge. Might throw one at you, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
But we didn't really talk about kind of approachabilities. We talked about some of the different apps folks use, but what kind of steps would you see to make technology a little bit more approachable? I know we talk trust, but I think there's more to it than that, isn't there? Yeah.
So my primary recommendation, I actually talk about this a lot, making technology more approachable for people. And my primary recommendation is to just use it more. Like it's a novel idea, but when you think about the simple thing that we've had a generation or two at this point growing up completely immersed in technology, and it's part of their lexicon, it's part of their thought process. It's all, they're almost born thinking about assuming the use of technology, right? So I'd say we have a lot of technology that we already use every day. Start asking yourself questions about the technology you're already using, right? You have a mobile device. Ask yourself questions about where the data is stored on that mobile device. What data is stored there as opposed to somewhere else? You know, everything's not stored on your mobile device. You know, some stuff is on the device. Sometimes some stuff your device just controls it and it just passes through your device to give you access to it. But start asking those questions. All of these apps, you know, like those apps did not exist at some point, which means even technologists who are familiar with them were not familiar with them at some point. So we started using them. Same thing with generative AI. There's a lot of generative AI tools out there. If you want to like demystify it and decrease your fear and anxiety around those tools, like put your baby toe into the shallow end of the pool and just start using more technology and you'll get more comfortable with it over time.
I think that's really good feedback. I think we've seen a lot of horror stories, and hopefully folks have learned from them. And I mean businesses, you know, examples of apps that were marketed as, you know, weather apps, but they kind of neglected to mention the fact that they would track you at all times and sell that data at all, you know. And I hope we're near the end of those, you know, those use cases where people absolutely did not intend or expect it at all. And I think, you know, the regulators are pushing quite hard, rightly in my view, for some of these egregious use cases. You know, more than we could fit in a call. But there was an airline at one point that, you know, used the camera on the screen to see how you reacted to every ad they showed. And I mean, no notice choice. What are you going to stand up on the plane? You know, they didn't even hit the first principles. You know, but anyway, I think we're pretty much against the clock. But maybe a final comment on my end, and you know, again, for the in-house perspective a little bit, if you have zero resources, no idea where to start whatsoever, what questions to ask, you know, my first kind of few little points be: don't confuse privacy and security. Security folks can take charge there, and you can support them. Look into what data you have, and I know everyone says that, but you know, try to write up a mini report. Notice choice. Use my 5 fingers again for each inflow. Do you have HR data coming in? You have vendor data coming in? You have customer, whatever it is. And you know, that sounds simple, but it's not, and you are going to find a can of worms. And before you even know anything about privacy, you go, whoa, hold on, we never told them, you know. And then maybe pick the top 2 or 3 and use the rule. It's not even guidance anymore from Colorado or Virginia, where they specifically say this is what you have to do in a little risk assessment. Do your best to answer all those questions, and it's not easy, but you know, you have to start somewhere and finish, publish, repeat, try again, to try and map out that bigger picture. And you know, with 3,000 plus class action lawsuits last year for privacy topics, the last thing you want is some kind of a big privacy scandal. It destroys everything we've talked about trust for this whole time today.
If I had one piece of advice for folks, I'd say check-ins are important. Checklists are important, but check-ins are equally as important. Make a list of what needs to be done, but make sure people are understanding, see what experiences they're having. And if they don't enjoy the process, try to understand why so you can improve that process. Because just that empathy, that caring about what people are doing can really have a positive impact on how they engage your systems and keep your data more secure.
Thanks for having me today. It was really great. Thanks everybody for questions in the chat as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Bobby and Joe, for an amazing discussion and sharing so candidly and insightfully on a critical topic. And once again, thank you, IDS, for your continued partnership, support, and for making today's webinar possible. So before we close out, I'd be remiss if I didn't invite you all to join us for the 2025 Cybersecurity Summit, March 24th and 25th at UCLA's Luskin Center in Los Angeles, California. The summit is the premier in-house cybersecurity gathering around, offering 2 days of in-person educational sessions and networking that's designed to equip cyber attorneys and professionals with the tools and insights they need to address today's most critical cybersecurity challenges. And it's all from an in-house perspective, enabling you to become a more well-rounded, informed, connected, and effective practitioner. There is a QR code on the screen that'll take you to more information, and you can register there. And if you have any questions or want to share feedback, please contact foundation@acc.com. And with that, our webinar is concluded. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.